born in Bourbon County, out in a country area, in a little place called Little Rock, Kentucky. I was my grandmother's first grandchild. Not really. She had one that died, and then I was her grandchild, following her around and tagging around after her in the flower garden and in the garden and everywhere. It was kind of a little village-like, and the houses were close together. My mother usually sometimes worked, day work and things like that, so I was with my grandmother a lot. During that time, everybody went to church. And Sunday morning, everybody got up, got themselves together to go to church. And that was a family and a whole neighborhood thing, that people went to church on Sunday. The children went to church. The mothers, the fathers, the grandparents, and everybody went to church. I often think, now that I think about it, that they all worked so hard that just getting together even on Sunday was a wonderful thing for them. They got to see each other, and of course they went to worship God, but it was like a family thing when everybody went to church. My grandmother, I don't know how much education she had, but she knew quite a bit about the Bible, and she read the Bible. She was always teaching us something out of the Bible. But she put together little plays and skits and so forth. And now that I think back on that, I don't know how, why, or that she was able to do that, but she had a big family, and usually it was her family that put these little skits and plays and things on, because some of them were good singers, some of them, like my mother, was a good speaker and could memorize things really well. And so whenever, like, any special thing in the church came about, she was one of the ones that would put a little program together. And so that, I think that kind of became her job, was to do that. And she did it well. And of course I didn't pay too much attention about the thing, but thinking back on it now, I realized it had to be a gift that God had given her, because I don't really ever know how much education she had. But I know that she hadn't gone to school to graduate from any school or anything like that. And yet she could do those things. She talked to me a lot about me tagging around after. And then sometimes I'd be sitting on her lap, she'd be combing all that hair I had, like yours. And she would say things about that God had people that he gave them special gifts from the time that they were born. He knew. He fixed that as they were, being born or being made in the body of the mother, and that he knew who would be able to do these types of things. That it wasn't just something that you picked up, that it was something that was there from the time of your birth. And when you got old enough to do these things, that's when you could get up and say a speech, and you weren't scared to do that. You could get up and make a talk, or you could get up and sing a song, and things like that. She also told us the one other thing that I've never forgotten. And she said she had a lot of girls. She had 7 girls. And she said, and you girls will have a hard time. And I never forgot that. I don't know why she said it. Of course, most of us did have a hard time, you know, and I always remembered that she just said that to me one day out of the blue. And I was sitting on her lap, I remember that. And she said, you know, all you girls will probably have a hard time. And that's all she said about it. She didn't explain why she said it. And so sometimes when the bad times came, I remembered that she had said that. I know that that a lot of it is the training about God that I had from the time I was very, very small, and the stories of God and the things that Jesus did and all these things that I learned when I was very small. And then I also know that as black people, I've always felt like, and this may not be even true or anything, that he knew who we were, and he knew what things we would go through, and that he fixed it for us that we could handle the things that we would have to go through as black women. And I think that he gave us maybe special strengths, special talents, and special knowledge and a know-how just for the strength that he knew that we were going to need as black women. And one time I read a story one time that was asking the question, why are black women so strong? It was just a little thing. And, you know, all that came back to me that we had been made that way. You know, when God made us, he made us the way that he knew that we were going to have to be, or that we may not be what we were supposed to be. He knew all about us, really, from the beginning. And I always felt like that I had something there whenever there were problems, and I had many problems of everyday living and different things in my life, but I never let it destroy me. I felt like, okay, I can do this, I can handle this, and I did. And I felt like that was part of my grandmother's teaching, that you can do it. You can do it. It may not be easy, but you can do it. I always liked learning. I liked books, and my mother worked in homes, you know, cleaning and things like that, and magazines or anything that they were through with, she brought them home with her. And I looked through every page, and even before I could read anything. And then sometimes they would give her books, children's books, after their kids had outgrown them. And she would bring them there and dump them out, and I would read. I was reading when I was 5. And so I went to school when I was 5. My aunt, who was just 2 years older than me, was in school, and I thought if she was there, I ought to be too, because we were the youngest things, you know, around at that time. And she was my grandmother's youngest child. And so I went to school when I was 5. I could write some things, and I could read. So I got passed to the 3rd grade. And many times when there were children playing outside in groups, I'd be somewhere by myself with a book, Because sometimes they said I was very peculiar because it was different. It was different. You know, some of them read and things like that, but they weren't into it like I was, because I'd give up playing out there just to sit down and read a book. If I had a different book that I hadn't seen, or my mother had brought me a book in from work or something, and I would go to myself and read. And it didn't bother me that they thought I was peculiar, but if I had a good book, I didn't care. And so I've always had that thing of learning. I still think that I got that from my mother. I met one of her older teachers one day, and she was talking to me about, she knew that I had done well in school and everything, and she said, "And your mother," she said, "was the smartest young woman in the school." And she said she was really, really smart. She said, but she got pregnant in the 12th grade. And of course then they put you out of school. So she didn't get to graduate. But she said she was the smartest young woman in my class. She was a teacher. And so anyway, I felt like that's where that strength came, was from her. I am the mother of 2 children. And I am the grandmother of 2 children. And I am the great-grandmother of 3 children. My children, I started in on them when they were very young. My son is an attorney, and he lives in Portland, Oregon. My daughter has 4 degrees, and theology, public administration, business administration, and I don't know, she's got another one or something. I can't keep up with her. I think that you pass that into the children. If you are really in it yourself, that you pass that into them. And of course I talk to them about those kinds of things, that knowing of who we were and who we are, and how hard things were for us sometimes, that having the education will be a big help for them in their work, in their lives. And so we talked about those kinds of things. And both of them were very good in school and did well and got scholarships and things which I needed. and they did well. And you know, I think that it has to be something that you talk about with your children as they are growing, of who they can be, of what things they will be able to do if they stay with it. If they try hard enough, they work hard enough, and things of that sort, that they can be whatever it is. My son told me he was going to be a lawyer when he's about this tall. And so he is. And Sharon didn't tell me, she just kept going to school. I think that it comes from inheritance, but then it also comes from parents being there for the children and explaining life as much as you can. Of course, we can't all just say life is this or that or the other, but we can explain and talk to them about life and about what they are capable of doing. And if we take the time to do that, and of course they think that I can do anything, I don't know why, but they think that. And then, you know, I guess it was because that I was always there for them when they, whatever they were doing, helping them and teaching them, and we went to church regularly, and they worked in the church, and they sang in the little church choirs, little children's choirs, and all those types of things, because to me this was part of who they were and who they were going to be. And I felt like that this was who I wanted them to be. And my daughter, when she was preaching once, she said, when we were small, she said, and all the mothers would go to the store, and they would bring back some kind of little toy or something, and my mother would come back with books. She told that on me in church one Sunday. But, you know, I did. And I would bring them in from their play at a certain time every day and tell them that it was time to come in and to get their books, or even if it was just a coloring book or something. You have a quiet time to get your body settled down, get your mind settled down, and so it can have some rest. And so they knew that they had to come in at a certain time. My son came home one Sunday and he says, "I'm not going back to Sunday school anymore." And I said, "Who said you weren't?" And he said, "Mom, we don't have any teacher. And those little girls are trying to teach us, and they're down there pushing us around and stuff." And I said, "Okay." So I talked to our minister, who was a fantastic minister at that time, Dr. Isaiah Moore. He taught us all. I mean, you know, he taught us Bible, women, men, and whoever was willing to learn. And he had Bible classes and so forth. I have a certificate somewhere here of years of study that I did with him, under him. And when I told him about the Sunday school class, he said, "Oh, all right." He said, "You," and there was another young lady there, Edna, and somebody else he named, "I want to see you all at my house. We are going to make teachers out of you." And we said, okay, so we went. And he did a Bible study, a fantastic Bible study. He did that, ran in the neighborhood even. And so we wound up being the teachers of the children. I was always in things in church, even if it was working with the children in Sunday school, well, I could write up a little thing for them, you know, just like that. I don't know where it came from, but I could do that. Well, we had Christmas plays and things, and I was working with, maybe 4th and 5th graders maybe. And sometimes I could make up the little poem that they needed if we didn't have a book, didn't have money maybe for a book to buy, and things like that. And I don't know where it came from. Just seeing them, see their little faces light up when they know something, or when you ask them a question and now they know it and they can give you the answer, you know, and they're really expressive when they're doing it. And if you say, you know, what do you know about Jesus, and maybe one of them will say something about, well, he got baptized, you know, or something like that, and they begin to know more about the Bible. Of course, the preacher was also having Bible study with those little ones. They followed him around like, I don't know what, the Pied Piper had all these children following. Well, that's the way he was with little ones. They followed him around like that. And we did too when we were small, because he was at the Little Rock Church when I was out there, and I was baptized in the Little Rock Church, and he was our pastor out there. And he taught us. He just taught us Bible, you know, really. I mean, we just learned more about the Bible from him, I guess, than we've ever learned from anybody else. And so we became teachers. and I moved on up to maybe 4th and 5th graders, and then I was teaching I had the teenage group. Once I started to doing these things, they knew that, I was teaching Sunday school and working. They said, we need somebody to, that can go to these places where these meetings and things are going on. And we need somebody that can bring us back what we're supposed to know. And I said, well, I don't know anything about CWF, I said. And they said, well, that's all right. What you don't know, we'll teach you. And so they did. They taught me what they knew. And so then, by me working with our CWF women and doing the things and learning the things from them that they knew and were doing, and then when the region asked me to be on their CWF board, then I said yes. I was still working, so I must have been about, I think I was about 50 or 51 years old. And of course, my kids were already, up and gone. And so I was able, I had my own car and things and all that, so I was able to go to meetings, bring back information to them. The only thing I told them, I said, no cooking. I will not be cooking. They said, you won't have to. We'll do the cooking. And we'd laugh about things like that. And so we had a good time. If we were going anywhere, and as many of them they could get in my car, they were in there. And they began to go to things that they had not been going with, regional things. But see, many of them were older, and they didn't do a lot of the traveling around much. Some of them weren't really quite able to. But they would send me as their delegate or whatever, so I could bring back whatever it was that they needed to be working on now as the CWF. We worked a lot with the Cane Ridge program. We would do that. When the Cane Ridge opened every spring, the CWF was in charge of that morning service. And we had people who sang. I mean, it was all of us, black, white, whatever, we came together and did that whole morning service. And we opened it up, and we also were the ones who did the registration out front when people came. We were just in charge of that for a long time, the CWF women. And so we had speakers, and we had singers, and we had musical people who had music, that they'd bring their instruments. And so we really got involved in regional things. And I was glad that we were able to do that. We had all the black churches came together because there was a little convention that we had. It was called Kentucky Christian Missionary Convention. And it was all the black churches, Lexington, Mount Sterling, Fairview, Little Rock, everybody. And so we had that. We'd have a big doings once a year meeting with that. And now some of the people, the women, did not like the idea that I was bringing in things from the region. It had been their thing for so long that some of them had an attitude about mixing. And of course, by that time I was into everything, so, well, I would bring back what we needed to do, but they would do what I asked. When we would have a special program once a year, and we would come up with maybe socks and panties for this home that we had in Danville at one time. They sold it. It just broke my heart when they did that, but they did. And they said, bring socks and painters. I nested in a church, and the CWF, and everybody, and in the KCMC. We had boxes of socks and panties. Everybody did their box. And I mean, the boxes was this tall. I tried to get one to the post office. I had to get somebody to take it. This was, they would cooperate and things like that. We sent material to overseas to women who were learning to make their own clothes. And it all would come to my house, this house. And that back room back there would be full of stacks of material that people had brought. So we would send that. They were beginning to be able to relate better to each other. You know, they seemed to think if I said, okay, we need to do this, we did it. And I never even thought about it in that manner. I just said, this is our program for this time. We have to get this together because this is our job for this season, or for, you know, like that. And so here would come all this stuff to my house. And one time we did the blankets for the Hope Center in Lexington, blankets. I had that back room back there stacked up with blankets. I said they can be used if you wash them, or they can be brand new, you know. And we had blankets. This girl had a station wagon, one of the CWF, and she and I put all those blankets in her station wagon. You couldn't even see out the back of it was stacked up. And we went up there and took them to the Hope Center. And that lady just thought it was wonderful. They carried them all in for us, you know, and everything. She said, we need things like this. And so we did that type of thing by being into the region more than they had before. And, you know, it got to be fun. And we raised the money that we needed to do what we needed to do as the CWF. And yet we had fun doing it. I think somewhere now something has been lost. There's not that come together type of thing. One of the things may be leaders. It's very hard to get leaders now who want to really lead and do the job that a leader is supposed to do. First place, you have got to know how to be a good leader. And you have got to step out there first and not depend on somebody else to do it and take your place, and you don't show up for a meeting and you have somebody else to do what you're supposed to be doing as a leader. And then you've got to know what it is, what your group is, who are they, so that you will know how to lead them, you know, what they need in order to be good people that can get the work done. And if you are not there as the leader, and you can't explain to them how important this is, or what it will mean to you, even if you do it for somebody else, and things of that sort, you've got to have that type of thing. It's not for me to make me look big because I'm the leader. It's to draw the women together, let each one of them learn more about what they're supposed to be doing as a CWF person, and then see what talents they have and let them use those talents. Let them use them. I found out that I had people in there that did a lot of things. You know, even the older ladies, they would knit these beautiful little footies, that house slippers or something that they, you know, we sold those at the little things that we'd be selling, pies and little stuff. Aprons, I made aprons. I made fancy aprons, I made plain aprons, and we would have a sale like that with things like that. And we had so much fun doing these things together. And if you're going to come in with a chip on your shoulder, or you're going to come in and want to take over the whole thing, or you're going to come in criticizing, then it's not going to work. And if you have a leader, let her lead. And you don't try to tell her what she's supposed to be doing. She is telling you how to keep the organization together. And you're trying to show how much you know, or how much, you could do, and all this type of thing. If you can do these things, then do them. But don't try to take the leader's job. And that comes up also. I didn't have no problem with it. I had a good time. I worked full time when I was in the CWF. I was working for just different types of work. I worked at UK for a little while. I worked in the restaurant for a while and things of that sort. And but once my children got large enough and were able to take care of themselves, within the home and things like that, that's when I got the job with the government, and I traveled a lot. I had to. It was part of my job to travel to military bases and so forth. And but my children were old enough, and Sharon was finally into college and teaching school, and and these kinds of things. So my life was moving as theirs was moving, and I could do more of this type of thing because they were old enough. I mean, they were taking care of themselves and things like that. You don't neglect your children, though. Even working, they knew I had to work. They knew I had always worked ever since they'd been born and knew about me, and but they knew I always found time for them. Whatever I was doing, whatever kind of work I was doing, there was time for them. And we would just do, if it wasn't any more than just get them by the hand, we'd take a walk and talk while we were walking. And then when I was able to get me an old car, we would go out on Saturday mornings for breakfast. I wanted to teach them, they were quite young then, because we weren't allowed to eat in restaurants. We were not allowed because black people were not allowed in those restaurants. And I worked in one, but when I was off, I could not go in there and sit down with my kids and eat. But I worked in the restaurant every day. But I could not go in there and take them on my day off and go in the restaurant part and sit down and eat. We weren't allowed. And that was during that, when all that was going on, the race issues. But I think Lexington opened up earlier than we did here in Paris. And so when I was able to get a little old car, I just put my kids in the car on Saturday morning and take them to a restaurant. I wanted them to learn how to go into a restaurant and sit down and eat. They were young. Sit down and eat and order, and how to treat the waitress who was waiting. And my daughter told me, we was talking about that not long ago, my daughter said, and I thought that was the most wonderful thing. That was just part of teaching. And because those facts were out there, we couldn't go in the store and try on a dress or a hat or anything like that. And so I sewed. I made most of my clothes and most of Sharon's, because I got that from my mother. She made all of mine. And So we didn't have a lot of money to buy anyway, but we always had clothes. And I couldn't make little boy clothes, so I'd go to Penny's and buy his. But anyway, we survived because I always believe that God never leaves. He doesn't leave. Sometimes we get a little away from Him, but I don't think that He leaves us. I mean, we belong to Him. We're His. And so I don't think that He just goes away and leaves us. I think He's always there, and He always knows, even when we're not doing what we should do. But He doesn't throw us away. He gives us an opportunity to get it right. And if you weren't right today, then He'll give you tomorrow to get it right. And so I have always had those kind of things in my mind, because I've never been no more perfect than anybody else. But I always knew that we had Him when we didn't have anybody else, when we didn't have anything else. And so all this was in my home with my children. My husband did not go to church. He was at church when he was growing up, because his granny, no, she was his aunt, reared him, because his mother died when he was young. And she had them in church on Sunday morning. But once he grew up and came back from the army, he did not go to church at all. And so I kept teaching, trying to keep the children in church and things, of that sort. And he didn't put up any fuss about us going or anything, but he didn't go. And so he seemed like he had lost all that when he came back from the service. But anyway, we went, and I always felt like that, and sometimes our marriage wasn't good. It wasn't good at all. But I always felt like that God was there, and that He was going to take care of me. Nothing else is more important in your life right at that time than your children. You know that you have to work. You would have to work. We all did. And you know that times are not always going to be exactly the way we want them. We also know that God is still in His heaven, and that if we pray and talk to Him about the problems and the things that we having and the things that we need Him to really step up for us for, it gets done. Now some people may not put it exactly that way, but I know that it does. I was very concerned about, as my kids got older, how am I going to educate these children? They're both smart as good. How am I going to educate them? I don't have that. My money is not that big that I can put two children in college. They were just 2 years apart. And I'd pray about that, and of course I was working, always worked. And so I kept praying about it, and I talked to my son one day about it. I said, now, Sharon will be graduating, and I can get her in, but 2 years later, I don't know that I can get you in, because she will still be in. And I said, what would you think about maybe enlisting in the service for a few years, and then your turn would come, that you would be making money, and then your turn would come. And he said, well, that's a pretty good idea. He said, we'll wait and see. And so we did. And when he graduated, he got a full scholarship to Center College down in Danville, Kentucky, which is supposed to be in one of the top 10 colleges. and he got a full scholarship. Then he signed up while he was there for that ROTC program and became a military, you know. And so he went through all of that, his military. He's already had put in 20 years in the military. And this lady in the school system, I never will forget her, Mrs. Scott. Center College came up looking for somebody, looking for kids who had leader instincts and who had excellent grades, and she gave my son's name. And that's how he got in there. And she gave him, and she called me and told me. She said, Center College is going to come send somebody to visit you. And I said, for what? And she said, well, they were over here today looking for somebody, looking for black children, because they didn't have many blacks in their school. It was a very expensive school. And they wanted children with good leadership, good grades, good manners, all that. And she said, I told him your son. I gave him your son's name. Well, I was just wild. I was just, you know, just totally wild, and thanking her and everything. And they did. They came to see me. Women on a mission. Women's faith today in the living God is the same as it was for our sisters in the past. But the journey and results of that faith may be different. Women are still concerned about their spiritual lives and want help and support on their journey. The past is not a bad witness, but we must never be content with what we have done in the past. We must continue to push and stretch ourselves to greater awareness and understanding. I wrote it during the CWF convention, and we were in charge of the program for that afternoon. I wrote a skit, play, whatever, a little short thing, and I gave them the names of the women, and they were to, and then I wrote their parts for them, and then they were to perform that. That was really wonderful. This older lady did Sarah, and she made it really fantastic. You know, Sarah and wanting to have a baby, and she hadn't had it, and then she was mad at God for a while, and all these things. And she really put it on well. She was a school teacher, and she told the story about Sarah and Abraham, and then she got to the part where finally that she found out that she was going to have a baby, and that was the fun part, because she really made that really really good when she called Abraham and told him that we are going to have a baby. Well, he had never really given up on it as much as she had, but she had, and she had tried to do it herself instead of letting God do it, like he said he would. And but I could see in my mind that I probably would have been like Sarah. I would have probably had these doubts too, you know. Here I am, 90 years old, and you're going to tell me that I'm going to have a baby, and you know that I'm even able anymore to have a baby. And so Miss Clemens did that, and she was a school teacher, and she was fantastic with it. She just brought the house down. The girl that did that, she was really good with that, and she did all these surprisings and things, you know, and yet she was really nice about what she was saying. She never did get upset. She just said, "I'm too young, and I'm engaged to, you know, to Joseph, and these kinds of things." But she was just real sweet about the whole thing, which I doubt that any of us could have been. Harriet Tubman was a brave lady, and she was a person who had love for other people, because once she got free, she could have gone on and never looked back. But she kept coming back to get more people, and coming back to get more people, and coming back until she had, I think it was about between 300 and 400 people that she freed. And she had had a rough life before she became free. The guy her master had beat her up and knocked her around. But she didn't forget those people. She came back and got them. And you know, she could have died any time that she went back down in there, because they were still looking for her. She was amazing. She was a lady that could speak, do orations and those kinds of things. She was really good at that. And she worked in that, tried to free women, to give women the right to vote and all that type of thing. And she would get up and give her speech. I would just love to have heard her do that. And she wasn't afraid at all. She'd just get up and give her speech that women should be having the same opportunities that men had. Ain't I a woman? That little man over there, he says women can't have as much rights as men because Christ wasn't a woman. Where did your Christ come from? Where did he come from? He come from God and a woman. Man had nothing to do with him. If the first woman ever made was strong enough to turn the world upside down, all alone, we women together ought to be able to turn it back and get it right side up again. Ellen Frost was the CWF leader, and we loved working with Ellen Frost. And she would come to things that we had whenever she could get away to come. And she was there the day that I had that little skit. And it went over so well and everything. And afterwards she says, now you need to write that down and put that in a book or something. And I said, oh, well, maybe if I have time, or something like that. I didn't really think too much about it. By that time, I had been in the CWF program long enough that I had come in contact with many of those women. And going to quadrennials and all that type of thing, I had met a lot of them. And so I felt like that the little skit would not be enough for a book. It needed something else if it was going to be a book. And so I contacted those ladies and asked them and told them what I was trying to do, and asked them to send me some information about themselves, and they did. And so I took that information and put it together, the way that I would like for the story to go, and they gave me permission to do that. They said, now this is who we are, you can fix it up, they said, and so I did. It was important to me because they had done things. They had worked hard. They had worked hard to hold the whole CWF program together. And that's a large job, because they had been to world CWFs and those type of things, and they would bring back information and things to us to use and to know. Yeah, she started it all. She took her egg money and things like that in order to get the program up off the ground and get it started. And she would travel. Those women traveled on mules or something, all back up in those counties, and that was really not well known. spreading the word around. And she did that. She was out there. And she didn't have all the easy things to work with. And she would sell her egg money sometimes when she needed money for, you know, and things like that. And she opened up the doors. And then everybody went in. My name is Rosa Brown Bracey. I was the first field secretary for Black Women's Work under the Christian Women's Board of Missions. I entered the Southern Christian Institute when I was 12 years of age. I later graduated and taught school for a while. I began my field work in 1916 and continued under the United Christian Missionary Society. This was during the time when the first General Convention of Christian Churches met in Nashville, Tennessee, September the 5th through the 9th, 1917. We had this play at the Quadrennial one year, and I was Cornella Barnes. So they gave me her part, and I had to do that. I am Cornella Jameson Barnes. My husband is Anderson Barnes, a Los Angeles, California businessman. We are the parents of triplets, 2 daughters and 1 son. I am an ordained minister of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. Serving the Lord has always been a very real part of my life. I started working with the women's organization very early. During the 1930s, I was on the staff of the former missionary organizations, Department of the United Christian Missionary Society.
Sweet little Jesus boy,
Rosa Page Welch. I got to know her at one of the convocations, one of the General Assemblies, I don't know which, but she and I sat together and watched the program, what was going on stage. And so I got to know, I told her my name, and I already knew who she was. And so I was very glad that I had the opportunity to do that. And she sings, and I have some recordings of hers.
Here then is the true oneness which you could find always in the communion service, satisfying the common longing of humanity, as Christians found their common need and their common answer in this experience. In Africa, I remember the scene. 2 by 2 the converts came to the communion table. The wine was pineapple juice served in small cups made of leaves. In another church in South India, which is truly a union church, we had a meaningful communion service together. There was a long line of many different nationalities and from many walks of life breaking bread together.
These are records of Rosa Page Welch's songs. And I was given these from a lady. I don't know where she got them from, but she was looking for me one day. We were on the Cane Ridge grounds, and she told me that she had something for me. And I said, okay. And she says, well, let me go down to my car and get it. So when she came back, she had these records, and she said, we were cleaning. I don't know where they were cleaning, but she said, we were cleaning, and we came across some records of hers. And we decided that we knew that you would want some. And so they brought me these records of Rosa Page Welch. I am Rosa Page Welch. I earned the name Ambassador of Goodwill because in my lifetime I have traveled all over the world for the Lord's work. I was born in Port Gibson, Mississippi, into a wonderful family. My dad was a musician and I loved music. I always said I was going to sing the blues just like Bessie Smith. Dad got an old organ and fixed it up so my sister and I could take lessons. That was one happy day for me. I entered Southern Christian Institute, and it was there that a lady heard my voice and found someone to sponsor me for voice lessons. I met Janice, as I met all the rest of them, in the programs and so forth that we have, CWF and all that. And we sat together in one lesson group, I think. And I was telling her about maybe we could have get everybody together and have a kind of a dinner and a speaker and so forth, and I would want her to be the speaker. And so we did that. We had one. We had one in a home where elderly people lived in apartments, and they had a big dining room, and they let us use it because one of the women lived there that was in the CWF. And we used that dining room and had a big, we had somebody to prepare the meal for us, and we had a dinner there, and she came and she was a speaker. I thought she was a very attractive woman, and we had some talking and things, because we would all of us would wind up at these things, with the meetings and so forth, and so we all kind of got to know each other, and I just enjoyed being around her. She was a really neat person. Whatever other things may come my way, I will always be appreciative of the work that I have been involved in with the CWF. Truly, it is an organization empowered by the Holy Spirit. I pray that the flame of the Spirit will continue to blaze brightly in the lives of all Christian women around the globe. We had kind of fun together. Sybil did. She was one of those soft-talking people, but she was fun. And when we were going to have this big banquet, the first one they'd ever had, and I was the one that did it, and I thought, if this doesn't go well, they're going to kill me. So for the KCMC, CWF, and honey, those women, they bought those tickets, and they came, and it was the biggest, nicest banquet, and Sybil was the one who spoke for us. She was our speaker. She was a really neat person. In all the church work I have been in, and in other things also, it seems like we are always the ones who are pushing it. We have to get it started. We have to push it and get others involved and things. And I think that, you have to get the whole church involved sometimes. And women are the ones who do that. And so all those women in there were women that have done things and been on a mission. And that's why this title just came up, to me, because every one of them have been involved in doing something to push the CWF along and to keep it going and to make it a strong organization. And they had done that. And so anytime that you're busy and you're making things happen, they were the ones that were doing it, and they were on a mission. The younger generation coming on needs to know. They need to know the good things, and they need to know the ones that weren't so good. And I think that's another thing that's been left out, is some of the bad things are not being told. But they need to know it all so that they can know how to live their lives and know what things may come up. during their lifetime. And that they will know that everything wasn't good when we come along. It's not going to be good for them all the time either. And they need to know that, so that they will be able to handle it, and do something about it. We have struggled for years and years and years, and we have accomplished quite a bit, years and years and years. And there are still more things that need to be accomplished. But I was wanting something, a closure that would include those women who had been such staunch women, and to bring in what they accomplished, even not being educated women. I'm talking about the slave women type, and yet they accomplished so much and brought us so much and taught us so much, even not being really educated people but they had something within, and that's one of my favorite songs, you all. That's something within me I cannot explain, and they had that. And I was always really just concerned about them and the things that they lived through and how bad things were for them. And yet they survived. They did things. They opened up schools. They did things of that sort and taught the children how to live, how to be people, and who was supporting them. And that's why I always have things like that about those people that lived back to that time. Our souls magnify the Lord, and our spirits rejoice in God, our Savior. That we stand with generations of women who know that the Lord their God is one God, who love the Lord with all their hearts and minds and strength. That we can remember those women who shaped the church in cloistered community and civil court, who loved the church when it was most unlovable. That we recall those women who came to this land, not on the deck of the ship, but in the dark hold of the slave ship, who preserved an American heritage and understood the liberating message of the Christian gospel, who know the double jeopardy of being black and female. That we know of missionaries who heard the call to teach and heal in the name of Jesus, who shared their faith with women and children throughout the world, who widened the horizons and expanded the vision of the church. That we are heirs of those women who call the church to accept new forms of leadership even today. That we are all of these women and more who seek to serve you. Our Lord, we offer this prayer of thanksgiving and gratitude. We are many, and yet we are one. We are bound together as women. We are a part of the family of God. We are empowered for mission because of these women. Thank you, God. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen. I believe that all of us women are empowered. We just have to use it. Cane Ridge is the place where the first beginning of the Christian church started. Right out there on that ridge, right here in Paris, Kentucky. And it is where all the other churches have emerged from, all the other Christian churches have emerged from Cane Ridge. And so, even all over the United States, Christian churches, our start, all of our starts are at Cane Ridge. That's where the Christian church started. Cane Ridge is special to me because I learned the history early. My grandmother and them gave big celebrations out there. The black churches would go out in the summer and put up a tent, and they would have services out there, and we were just tiny little kids. And that has been part of me since I was a small child. But hearing the history and learning the history of how it started really has kept me interested in Cane Ridge, of this somebody coming out there. And this was during the time of Daniel Boone, that this church, this minister and some of his people came from up out of South Carolina. And Daniel Boone told them about this wonderful place of Kentucky. And they decided that they would come and see for themselves. And they were Presbyterians. And they came and they built that log cabin. They didn't stay, a long time, but they built that cabin. And then they kind of scattered and went back to where they were, and then other people came and began to see what it was all about there. But the biggest thing, celebration that was there, that I think that defined Christianity there, was when they all had this big meeting, and everybody came from everywhere, ministers, all kinds of people. Of course, they were horseback, they had buggies, and they came to Cane Ridge on that big day. And there was shouting and passing out and rejoicing, and people were just even laying on the ground shouting, and it was just a big celebration. You can't even name, because there were all those people and all their slaves with them, because wherever they went, they took them. And so there was all this mixture of people that day that were learning about Christ and Christianity. And they said it was such a rejoicing thing. You couldn't even, count the people. And they stayed there celebrating and rejoicing until all the grass around the area had been eaten by the horses. and there was no more food for the animals, and probably no more food for them that much. And that was how it all opened up and started for the Christianity side. It was just a big celebration. And we celebrated that 200. It was 200, a little over 200 years now, but we celebrated a 200th anniversary for that. And it was huge. We had to borrow some of the land that was next to Cane Ridge in order to take care of all the people that were there. And we put up tents and things on these people's property. They belonged to the Christian church, and they let us use part of their farmland and things. It was so many people there that day. It was the 200th anniversary. Cane Ridge started out having church in their log cabin. Is still there. Their log cabin's still there. The outer thing that you see is it's a protective measure to keep the logs and things from deteriorating. And they did that in the 50s. They had people come out and put brick around it. But inside, there is a place you can walk all the way around the log cabin in there. It doesn't cover the log cabin. It's just a place where you can walk around it and see it. And it is tall. And it's still there. And it's still well preserved. And so one time we had service inside because the weather had caught us. And we had it inside, and we had chairs all around in that outer circle, that outer part, and things to get the people, so people would have a place to sit. But when that was built, there was inside there is a area called the balcony, but it's inside, and it's inside the log cabin, and it was where the slaves sat. But there was no stairs in there at that time. There is now, but there wasn't. And so they would put a ladder on the outside of the building and climb in the window and come in. And some of our people kind of got a little touchy about, oh, we had to sit in the balcony. I don't care where we had to sit. I was just so glad that our people got to attend and learn about Christianity. It didn't matter where they sat. They could have sat on the floor. That wasn't important. They wanted to hear. They wanted to know. And what I also was glad about, that they brought the slaves with them. Of course, you know, there's another side that, well, they had to, or else they probably would, the slaves would have gotten away from them. But they brought them to church with them. And they would climb that ladder and climb up in that balcony. And they didn't try to stop them from doing that. And that's how we had those young black ministers and things coming out of there to start our churches. It's just a remarkable thing, and sometimes we let our negative thoughts take over to kind of wipe out the good things that came from this. I always felt that maybe some of my ancestors may have been in that group that would go over there to that church to see what was going on, because I had a lot of people that lived on that road and back in that Cane Ridge Road area. A lot of my people, my like great aunts and things, lived on that road. And I don't know whether they were some of the people or their parents were some of the people that might have been coming to Cane Ridge, because there was no black church yet. And they could have been there in that group. And I hope they were. But, you know, those kinds of things are the things that stand out for me about Cane Ridge, that how and why, of all the big as the world is, did God choose Cane Ridge to put his church? And that's the Christian church. Now, some of it has kind of changed its name, or say Church of Christ or whatever, but they all started there at Cane Ridge. Built in 1791, the Cane Ridge Church and grounds hold significant religious connotations for us today. For those who claim to be children of the Stone Campbell movement, the Christian Church, Disciples of Christ, Churches of Christ, and the Christian Churches, Churches of Christ, more commonly known as the Independents, Cane Ridge is a sacred place, a holy land. For it is here, more so than other places, that a new way of preaching, teaching, and living out the gospel was started. My daughter and I wrote this book in celebration of the 200th anniversary of Cane Ridge. We were supposed to be doing this for Ella Wayne Stewart, and so he asked, would we put together a book on some of the history of the churches that we knew about, and that he was going to start a whole, class of some kind with them. And so we got these books together, and they came out just about the time that the 200th anniversary of Cane Ridge, and that was a big to-do that day, that week. They did it the whole week. And he never got in touch with us, never called us, never said anything about the books anymore. So we had all these books on our hands, so we sold them that day at the 200th anniversary at Cane Ridge. People were buying those books. I knew the history of the Little Rock Christian Church out there, and it was the second black Christian church anywhere. And then she was the pastor of the Midway, which is the first black Christian church. So she wrote about Midway, and I wrote the one about Little Rock, because I knew that history, knew that story about how that young man lived on that road. And he was a slave. His name was Buckner, Samuel Buckner, and he lived on that road, because there's farms all along that road where you go to Cane Ridge. And I have a feeling that one of those farms was what he came off of, but I couldn't say that positively. So I didn't say that. But I feel like he came off of, because there's a farm there that's named Bucknor, Bucknore. And I felt like that might have been the farm that he came from. But, and his father was the master of was his master anyway, and he was a slave. And after Cane Ridge began to have church and things up there, and he was curious, so he'd slip off and go up there to see what they were doing. And he kept doing this and trying to preach and everything. He was just a kid. And finally, his daddy set him free. He said every time he got ready to look for him, he was somewhere trying to preach or preaching. And so he set him free, and he went to Cane Ridge regularly and learned, the Bible and everything. And they baptized him down in the creek. I know where that creek is. And they baptized him, and he stayed there until he learned what it was that he was wanting and what he could do with it, and then he would go out and preach. And he started the Little Rock Christian Church, and out up under an oak tree out in the yard. And he started that church. He started a church in North Middletown. He started one in Middlesburg. And he was just all over that little area of ours out there, starting churches. And the Little Rock Christian Church is the second Christian church, black Christian church. And Sharon did the one on Midway. And that pastor came out of Cane Ridge also. Oldest black church anywhere, black Christian church. That church came out of the Midway Christian Church because all the slaves went to church with the masters. I think that was so they could keep up with them and know where they were while they were in church. So they took them with them. And they had so many, they started having children and things like that. And Midway Church couldn't hold them all. They gave them a little building now where they have the soccer field. It was a little building out there. They gave them that building. And the women of the church, now I want you to get this, the women of the church went to Cane Ridge and found them a minister. And they bought him, paid his money from everyone who owned him, and they brought him back to that church for those black people of theirs. At the kitchen table. My kitchen is pretty good size. It's so whatever books and things that I'm going to be using and things, I would just spread them out there on the table, and I would think about sometimes home life when you were little. You know, they had a big old table in the kitchen, and everybody ate, and there'd be a whole lot of people around the table, especially at my grandma's house and all of them children. And so at the kitchen table, seems like to me it's just something there that helps you to come to think about the things that you are trying to put together, that it brings back some of the memories of things that went on around the kitchen table years ago. We played games around the kitchen table. We got our homework on the kitchen table. And it was a part of our life. And so when I started to writing for the regional church, those things that I was trying to write, and I would go in there on the kitchen table. It's more comfortable to me in there to do it. And I'd have all my materials in there, and there was the telephone in the kitchen in case that I had to get up and answer the phone while I was trying to put things together. And it was just something about doing that at the kitchen table. Ellen came over one time. We were doing a big worship for something that we were having, and she came over to kind of give me a hand if I needed one. So we sat at the kitchen table, and she said, so when she got ready to talk about something, about the job that I had done she was telling that I had done the worships, and I did them all the time. But anyway, this was a special, something we were having. And she said, and it was done at the kitchen table. So it just kind of became something there, you know, that at the kitchen table, lots of things happen. Lots of good things happen at the kitchen table. And if you break it down, really, it's at the kitchen table that hungry people get fed. It's at the kitchen table that we thank the Lord for the food that He has given us, and we pray for those who don't have food at the kitchen table. So it just became sort of a symbol for me, you know, at the kitchen table. And I do so many things at the kitchen table. When you would say, well, what happens at the kitchen table? Lots of things, really. You do some of the teaching of your children at the kitchen table. When they're eating, you teach them how to eat, how to use their knife and fork, how to sit up straight at the table, how to say their blessing for the food. All of that's done at the kitchen table. I believe that He called me first to have these two children, because I had no thought about having a family and all that type of thing. I just wanted to go to school somewhere. I wanted to go to college someplace and all that. Well, it wasn't possible. I had no money. We had no money, you know, and times wasn't like it is now, where you could get scholarships and all this type of thing. So, but I have said that before too, that I feel like that God had this already laid out for me, of exactly what He wanted me to do, even though I was trying my best to do something else. I even signed up to go into the military nursing corps right after I got out of school. Well, see, I graduated in 1945. See, I'm an old person. And so anyway, I signed up and passed everything. But the war was ending at that time, and they weren't taking on anymore. See, I wasn't supposed to go. That's why I wasn't supposed to do that. But I had signed up for it. I knew there would be some type of education I could get somewhere free, you know. And anyway, that wasn't for me. I didn't get to do that. And so I also, now that I look back, I feel like that having a family was important, that God wanted me to do that, because I feel like that He had special things also for them to do. And so it's fine, you know. It's fine with me now. I've always had the faith, because thinking that, you know, God looked after me. I was didn't have much money and things, but I could always manage to take care of things that needed to be taken care of. And I was sick. I think that was about the time I had just joined the CWF regional thing, and I had some type of lung infection, which they never knew what caused it or anything. I was at work the day I got sick. We were having a meeting, and I almost died. I mean, they just didn't. The doctors, I was at UK. They didn't know what caused it. They didn't know how to doctor it. They just but the day they took me there from our hospital, they didn't think I was even going to make it to the Lexington Hospital, because I couldn't breathe. So as soon as that door opened, those doctors were right there with another bed. They put me right on that bed and put me over a pillow like this and stuck a hole in my side right here and put a tube in it. And I mean, we had just hit there, and they drew out a whole package, plastic package about that tall, about this wide, of some kind of fluid out of my lungs, which I was smothering to death on the way over there. And they kept me there in ICU for about 9 or 10 days. They was working, but the temperature wouldn't go down. Everywhere the infection was, it kept my temperature up. The night that, I think they probably thought I was going to die that night, and 2 girls came in, the nurses, young girls that come in and help. And they were just cussing up and carrying on me. They was talking about my son. You got the best looking child. The boy, they said, that came in here today. You know, my son had been there, Sharon had too. And they changed my bed. They give me different pillows. They was just doing everything and talking all the while, you know, and they was really cute. And I was enjoying them, just, you know, I wasn't saying anything, I just watching them. And they put pillows all behind my back, turned me over, so I wouldn't lay on my back, because I couldn't breathe when I lay on my back. But in the night, that night, I tell this all the time, I told it in church. In the night, I woke up and somebody was in my room. They were on this side of me where I couldn't turn over to see it, but somebody was there. And I said, I called my daughter's name, I called Gerald's name, and I said, I knew I had told them to go home and get some rest, because they had been hanging around the hospital forever. But somebody was there. And of course, to me, it was Christ. You know, He wasn't ready for me to give it up yet. And the next morning, when the nurse came in, she always came to do that temperature, because they couldn't get that temperature down. And my temperature was normal the next morning. Well, she took off running to get the doctors, and here come about 5 doctors, because the UK's got more doctors than anybody. And they talked, and they carried on. They felt my face and, you know, my body and things and all that. Of course, I still was kind of, you know, wheezy, because, you know, my lungs had been damaged, really. And I know that. That's why I have these kind of coughings and things like that. And but every time I had awakened that night, I was saying the 23rd Psalm. I was just saying it. I could hear myself. So, you know, I was just saying it. And then I would doze off and go back to sleep. And then I would wake up, and I'd be saying it again. And somebody was there you know how, if you was in the room right now with your eyes closed and somebody just eased in here, you would know they were here. The presence of them was there. And somebody was there beside my bed that night. So they put me out on the floor about 3 days after that for a while so they could keep a check on me. Next thing I know, they were sending me home. I will be 82 years old on the 19th of this month, next week. Well, I've always liked being a woman. I have never heard anybody say, you know, that I've always liked being a woman. And I've always had my own things, self, knowing who I was and what I could be and what I could become. And maybe that sounds like bragging or something, but I always felt that way about me, because whatever little thing I started, I usually could do it or, you know, complete it or whatever, even if it was something small. And I wondered sometimes how I would use this. You know, I had it, but I wasn't doing much because circumstances and all that type of thing. But yet, whenever something come up that seemingly would have been hard, I could do it, and I would get it done. And so finally, I just said, well, Lord, I guess you just want me to do these things, because every time I try something, you know, it usually works. As I told you, I always felt like that God had his hands on me. I always felt like that. I always felt that he did. And of course, that would make me think about things a little better than I would have probably, you know, because the things that I really knew that I wanted to do and needed to do, I had been able to kind of accomplish that. I needed a car really bad one time. And I had gotten a job at UK, and I didn't have a car. My husband had a car, and he was real finicky about it, and he didn't want me to learn to drive. That was it. But anyway, there were advertisements showed up in the paper one day. Now, all these kind of things to me may sound crazy, but you know, God puts things in front of you for you to do what you need to do. And it showed up in our newspaper that there had been a guy who was teaching people how to drive. And so I called him up. And I said, are you going to be doing this in Paris too? And he said, yes, ma'am, if you want me to, if you want to learn to drive. I said, I need to learn to drive. I said, because the jobs now, if you want a job, you got to go out of town to get one. At least you got to go to Lexington or somewhere. And he said, I'll be there. I said, I work at Jerry's restaurant in Paris. And I said, I don't have to be there till 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And he said, I'll tell you what, I'll come about 3:45. I'll pick you up, and we'll drive. Because me, I had never driven anything. We will drive until time for you to go to work, and then I'll drop you off at work. So we did. He had a little small car. Oh, I got in there, and you know, he said, now you're going to drive this, and I'm going to tell you what to do. So we did. We drove, and he had me backing in driveways and all that kind of stuff. And I think, oh, you know, we was on a kind of county road where you had room to do these things. And for a whole week, we did this. At the end of that week, he says, you're good enough. You can do it. And I said, oh, you mean that I can, you're going to turn me loose for me to drive? And he said, yes. And I said, well, he said, you can use my car to go take your test. I'll be down here to pick you up, take you to the courthouse so you can take your test. I got in the car with this man. They said he was awful mean, this guy was, who was going to be showing me. And we drove around, you know, and he never said a word, so I just kept driving. And so then he did tell me, he said, now pull up here and park. And I thought, oh, Lord, this is going to be it. Well, I was backed in there and parked that little car, honey, and went right on. And I passed the test. That's for that first time. And then we had a neighbor who knew about cars, and he was a young man. And I said, if you see a car out there and where it's in good shape, you know, that maybe at a reasonable price that I might can buy, you let me know. So one day he hollered at me up the road. He was about 2 houses down from us, and he said, I found you a car. He said, come on, I'll take you so you can see it. And he took me, and I had a 55 Chevrolet. And it was in pretty good shape, you know. So I said, okay. I said, now I'm going down here to the bank right now. I said, I had never borrowed any money from the bank in my life. Didn't have any money in the bank either. And I went down and asked him, I told him I need a car to get to work. He said, okay. They filled out the papers and gave me $500 to pay for my car. Those kind of things that happen in my life, you know. I know there has to be somebody looking after me. And I needed that car because right after that I left Jerry's and got a job at the UK in Lexington. You know, it just works like that. If you believe that that'll do it. You have to believe that it'll happen. I think what we really all need to do is just always be a little closer to God. And I think that helps us solve our problems and just puts things right in our face, you know, because He's looking after us. If we believe this, and we know that He does these things, you know, then all we have to do is trust it and believe it. And it happens. It may not happen tomorrow, but it may happen at the end of the week or something, you know. And so I've always had a mind like that it, you know, that's the way it worked, that I belong to Him. And that He knows what I need when I need it. And believe it. If you don't have that belief that in God, that He does these things, and, you know, people are just talking crazy when they tell you this stuff, it's not going to work for you anyway. But you have to believe in Him and be thankful when He does things for you. You know, we just get stuff and we never say thank you, Lord, or anything. We just think it's our due that we're supposed to get it. And then when we don't, you know, well, I knew that wasn't going to work anyway, or some type of thing like that. I never did have that. I always felt like that. That God was there, and He's always been there with me. I had a time carrying my baby boy, and I had kidney problems with him. We like not made it. I had a fantastic doctor. He was wonderful, and he took care of me. I would have to go to the doctor every day for a while because the bladder and kidneys were infected. That's not good when you're pregnant. So, but he worked with me, and he worked with me, and I was in the hospital when I was 7 months, and finally they got that bladder straightened out. And he's been healthy ever since. I have attended 6 quadrennials. 6 quadrennials. I've always felt like it was a wonderful thing for all of us women to have the opportunity to meet one another. We even roomed with one another, and we would wind up eating together. Sometimes we'd be in the classes together, And I've just really loved that idea of all of us being able to be there and enjoying the things together and learning. We were learning also while we were there. It wasn't just to greet people and things like that. We were actually learning about one another more and who we were, and the things that made us who we were. Sometimes these kinds of things came up in the talking and so forth. And we were just all over this big place with all these people that we had never seen before. And yet by the time we left, they were friends of ours. When we started doing, we had as many as 4,000 and 5,000 women to come to that. And that's a lot of women to get together at one time. And it was just a wonderful affair. And I enjoyed every year that I was there. I led the workshop for women, and we had we had big discussions because most of them were of my race. The ones who came to my workshop were of my race, and we had big discussions about the women and the men in our race, and we had fun in that. I mean, there was a lot of women in that class that day. I would encourage women to come to the quadrennial because sometimes we need that togetherness, to know one another better, to not hold a lot of things in our minds that maybe we grew up with, or things that we have heard, and it doesn't matter about the races or such. We all just kind of come together and we eat at the same tables, and as I say, sometimes we even roomed together. And I think we needed that because of some of the ideas that we have grown up with about race and so forth. Each of us, our race and the other race, they have heard their parents or people, and that probably told them things that really we found out later when we met these people and became friends with them and worked with them, that it wasn't important, that it could just be laid aside, because we had come to know each other ourselves, and not from what we had been hearing, as we grew up, so much as the things that were negative within the races, and that we made our own decisions about this, and we wound up, I have wound up with many friends. I enjoy encouraging the next generation because this is a big part of their lives to be. They're young now, but if they live to be older people, and like me, this is sort of a balance there that they have learned when they were young. And the things that we learned in our youth stays with us during those years. And then we begin to understand all of that was given us then when we were younger, and what it did with our ancestors, gave them strength to do so many of the things that we couldn't even do now. It built us up. So therefore, the younger people still need this encouragement, this teaching, this studying, in order to build something for themselves to hold on to as they get older and move into their older life and so forth, where they can also help and aid the next young generation. And if they do that, the next generation will be stronger, just knowing that these things have already happened. They have already done things for this group of people, older though we are, that it has taken care of them and brought them to this age, that if we, as younger people, they might say, get into what they're teaching and learn what brought them where they are, that perhaps we can look forward to doing these things in our age and time. And it would still be needed, because there will be a new generation coming along that will need to know. They may think that we don't learn anything from them, that we are always bossing them around or something of that sort. But I have learned, starting with my children. Both of my children are educated. And all the time that they were in college, whenever they came home, we sat down together, and I would ask questions about things that I knew nothing about. And we would just have a good time with that. They would tell me about things or try to teach me, and I say, I don't want to do it. I want to hear about how it's done and things like that. And because I really didn't have time to just sit down and go through and learn the whole thing. And so in church, being with these younger people, they have, we have several who have these skills of being able to come up. They have the computers, and they have the cameras, and they have all these things some of them do in their homes. And they are a big help to us. They make the bulletins for the church. And so I think that we help each other. I don't think that it's just a one-sided thing all the time. We help one another. We need one another. We can't just stand up and say, well, we've already done what we've done. Now you all are going to have to do it. Well, if we don't cooperate with them, and if we don't let them know that we are willing to work with them, or we are willing to just say, I don't know how to do this, you do it. If we can't say that, a lot of people don't want to say that they don't know. And if we can't do that, then we are not helping them. And then we're missing out on things ourselves. But I want to know also, I want to know how this comes about. You know, what is it we can do with it within the church? What can we use this for? Because they have those wonderful cameras and all that stuff. We're on Facebook now. Some of them in the church have all that. So we're on Facebook. They said, you wasn't here and we didn't get your picture. I need a picture. So I gave them the picture. And they're on Facebook. We're on Facebook. Our church is. And so those are the kind of things that I know nothing about. But if they're doing it and I can encourage them to do it, that's what I do. And I just enjoy knowing that they are capable of doing these things that I've never heard of. You know, you have to always Not try to do it by yourself. If there are people that you know can help, call them, talk to them, tell them, come and help me do this. See, these are the kinds of things that you don't, because you're older, don't feel like that you know everything. Because we don't. So much that we don't know. But we have things that we need to give to the younger people. Things that they don't know. And that's the way it works if we are not so afraid that people will think we are old and don't know anything. I don't worry about all that. I'm just thankful that I'm still here. I've always been one of those that I wanted to be as good as I can make it. And one of my friends, she teases me a lot. I was singing a song one day and kind of messed up one of the verses. And it just upset me so. And she said, it was okay. She said, you can't always be perfect. She told me that. I wasn't really trying to be perfect. I just wanted it to be correct, you know, and wanted it to be right the way it was supposed to go. And but she made that remark to me. She said, you can't always be perfect. And I thought to myself, I wasn't trying to be perfect, but I was trying to make it correct, right. But I think that sometimes we do try to push ourselves too much, when really we are doing fine. And we want to keep pushing and keep pushing. And then sometimes we get frustrated because we think it ought to be better or different or something like that. And instead of letting it be what it is, everything that we do does not have to be up in the air where everybody knows about it and everybody can see it and hear it and all that. A lot of times the things that we do only helps us. It's for what it does for us sometimes, and not for everybody. And we do get to the point sometimes where we think that it's got to be this way because of everybody else. And that's just putting a lot of worry on our minds and on us, and sort of takes away what this feeling of so forth that we have is doing for us. Because everything we do is not always for publicity or for everybody else to see it or know about it or anything like that. It's for what it does for us also when we do it. I think it's wonderful that I got the opportunity to do it. And I'm hoping that it will go out to the women that they can do it also. That it's not something that we were just able to do, or that these older women, even older than me, were able to do. It's something that they can do also. If they have the will to, and the knowledge of wanting to know and to help somebody, to help others who are coming along, because we're all moving. And so therefore, as we move, there's somebody coming right behind us. As we move, somebody is coming. All those younger people are coming behind us, all those younger women. And what they need to do is come together and know that whatever God gave us, He will also give it to them, if they ask and want to do the types of things and be the wise people that they think maybe we are. And we may not be top wise, but we have learned something from just living. And if they can get that in their minds, that they don't have to be the one out in front all the time, They don't have to be the one up at the top that everybody's looking at and all these types of things. That you can start with yourself and the person right next to you, or the one right on this side of you, or somebody that's needs somebody to be close to. They can do that. And it moves. It moves. If you get this person going and getting them to the point where they can believe in themselves, then they're going to do that with the next woman. And this thing is a moving thing. It's not something that just one or two people have this thing that they can do this. It's a moving thing. For my time in my life, God and the people that I worked with and other women in the church and things, they gave me this. They already had it. And they put me in places or had me doing things that was going to make me a wiser person, a more knowledgeable person. And I couldn't have done it without them, because they knew. They knew the history. They knew what it needed and what it still needed as they were beginning to back up a little, and they pushed us forward. They knew that they could not do it like they had been, and so they put us out there. And of course they supported us, and they put us in places where maybe we wouldn't have gone, like to the Regents Board or places like that we really didn't have much knowledge of. And so they did. They always had one or two people who knew about the regional board and the region work that they did. And so they didn't keep it to themselves. They gave it to us. Wisdom is to be shared. Why would you want it? To just sit and hold it, or just to make yourself feel important or something like that? Wisdom has to be put out there for those generations that's coming along, so that they will know how to live, know that they are capable. And because sometimes they feel like, oh, I couldn't do that. Of course you can. Why can't you? You have a good mind. You've had more education than I have. You know, so I know you can do this. And so a lot of times they wind up doing it. But they don't have sometimes much confidence. And we have to keep giving them that confidence, that I know that you can do this. I know that you can get up and talk. I know that you can get up and sing a solo. And, you know, so do it. That is the wisdom of women.
There is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole.
The CWF purpose is to provide opportunities for spiritual growth, enrichment, education, and creative ministries, to enable women to develop a sense of personal responsibility for the whole mission of the Church of Jesus Christ. God calls us together. He calls us to give thanks. He brings us to participate in a community of faith. God invites us to speak the truth, and we heed His call and rejoice in what God enables. God breathes into us the life breath of His Spirit. He captures our hearts with an explosion of love that we might touch the hearts of the world. God holds us to His holy being, and we share what we have been given. CWF Scripture, that which we have seen and heard, we proclaim also to you, that you may have fellowship with us. And our fellowship is with the Father and with His Son, Jesus Christ. 1 John 1 through 3. It means that we've been put here for a purpose. Women have been put here for a purpose. not just because we are the ones who bring back other children into the world. That's wonderful. But that's not the only thing that he put us here for. We are here to spread the message, tell the story, and to live the story, and to be to one another sisters in the faith, and to answer the calls when God calls us to do something, that we don't say, well, I can't do that, let somebody else do it. That we will answer and say, I will try. And that's what we do. When we are called to do something that we've never done before, we don't say, well, I can't do that. We say, well, I will try. And we find that there are many things that we can do that we never thought that we would be doing, that we never thought we'd be capable of doing. And now we are doing things. Women are doing things. My daughter Sharon was called to be the first female pastor of the Midway Christian Church, which is the first black Christian church that was ever started. You know how we are when our children do something wonderful. We're just glad all over when they accomplish something that they have wanted to do, and they are capable of doing it, and they have the opportunity to do it. And it does wonders for us too. And it's a big step for all women. All women.
This production was made possible by a grant from the Women's Endowment Fund of International Disciples Women's Ministries. This DVD is available for purchase from Disciples Women's Ministries of the Christian Church, Disciples of Christ. Contact odw@dhm.disciples.org or go to www.discipleswomen.org. A study guide is also available for free download at discipleswomen.org. Photos are courtesy of Melvia A. Fields, Disciples Historical Society, Disciples Women's Ministries, and the book The People of the Table, a pictorial directory and history of the Christian Church's Disciples of Christ in Kentucky, written by Donald A. Nunnally and John Eldon Cornett. Thanks to our interview team, Sheila Spencer and Mary Ellen May, and to our editorial and study guide team, Patricia Donahue, Sheila Spencer, and Debbie Phelps. Video production provided by May Videography, The Memories of a Lifetime, www.mayvideo.com. Copyright 2011 International Disciples Women's Ministries in partnership with Disciples Home Missions and Just Women.